Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 431. I'm the host, Kyle Anzalone. A lot to talk about on today's show, big developments happening in Ukraine, and I will be breaking all that down. But first, just if you can, share the show. It's at the Libertarian Institute on the blog at antiwar.com. YouTube, Rumble, and Odysee for the video version of the show. It's up everywhere you can find podcasts. So if you're a new listener, just go ahead and click the subscribe button. If you haven't, give the show a rating and review. If you're on YouTube, a thumbs up, whatever you can to help bump it up in the algorithms a little bit. You follow me on Twitter at @KyleAnzalone_, where I'll actually post the video of the show directly to Twitter. So, if you're getting into watching videos on Twitter, Tucker Carlson's show's there now. You certainly watch the show that way on Twitter. And you can also just click the link there and it'll take you to YouTube or wherever you want to watch it. And then you can get the full show. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. And here we go. First story up today. This is important. State Department falsely accuses Roger Waters of anti-Semitism. And this is from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. The State Department has falsely accused rock legend Roger Waters, a co-founder of Pink Floyd, of anti-Semitism over a recent performance in Germany. Waters came under criticism for a May 17th show in Berlin where he donned an outfit that resembled a Nazi uniform, part of a performance of the legendary Pink Floyd album The Wall. In response to the criticisms, Waters released a statement and said that the elements of the show he was criticized for are quite clearly a statement in opposition to fascism, injustice, and bigotry in all its forms. Attempts to portray those elements as something else are disingenuous and politically motivated. The depiction of an unhinged fascist demigod has been a feature on my show since Pink Floyd's The Wall in 1980, Waters said. And imagine how absurd this is, right? Like, you have somebody who, he puts on a performance for his shows. It tells a story. It's not just somebody going out there and playing their old top 10 hits. He's trying to communicate a message to the audience in his performance. That's a lot of what he's doing here. And so, this character, I think it's called Pink, will come out on stage and he's insane, right? And that's Roger Waters is playing a character. Imagine if you're somebody who's like, well, this person played a villain in a movie, and so therefore they're a terrible person who endorses, murder and all the terrible things they did in the movie. That's completely stupid. And if you're playing a villain in a movie, then your character is actually going to be portrayed in a negative way. And so what you're doing is you're actually helping to, make that action, whatever that is. And in Roger Waters' case, is fascism. He's denouncing that. And so this is just really, really stupid. It's a really big piece of propaganda. And the fact that, it wasn't just picked up on by the Israel lobby, because I do expect that, right? They really don't like Roger Waters because he is so pro-Palestine in a positive way, right? He's a big advocate for the Palestinian people. He understands what's going on over there. All he does is he looks at Human Rights Watch and says, "Oh, Human Rights Watch says this is an apartheid state, so I'm a good person, so I'm gonna oppose apartheid," right? I mean, that's how simple opposition to the government in Tel Aviv is, and yet, the lobby for that country will come out and just slam anyone who opposes it. And so we have, due to his support, this is back to Dave's article, due to his support of Palestinian rights and his critiques of the Israeli government, footage of Waters' concert has been taken out of context on social media in an effort to spear him as an anti-Semite. The U.S. Special Envoy to combat anti-Semitism joined the smears on Twitter, accusing Waters of despicable Holocaust distortion. On Monday, independent journalist Sam Husseini and AP reporter Matt Lee asked the State Department spokesperson about the envoy's comments. And this is Husseini. It's an obvious attack on fascism, and yet your ambassador is denouncing it and pretending that Roger Waters presumably because he defends Palestinian rights as well as other people's rights, is an example of anti-Semitism. Are you going to distance yourself from this, or are you going to bat down? And the spokesperson said he wasn't aware of the situation, which is what they always say when they don't want to answer a question. But the State Department gave Matt Lee a written response on Tuesday and backed up the envoy's smear of Waters. The concert in question, which took place in Berlin, contained imagery that is deeply offensive to Jewish people and minimalized the Holocaust. The Department of State said the artist in question has a long track record of anti-Semitic tropes to degenerate the Jewish people and denigrate the Jewish people. And what a stupid thing to say. I believe Roger Waters' father, I think this is like famously known, but that his father was killed by the Nazis. And so this isn't somebody who has any positive view of fascism. I mean, his entire career, a lot of his music, like this is one of the most famous bands in the entire world, one of the most album sales of any band in the entire world, has dedicated themselves to anti-war, anti-fascistic messages here, right? I mean, this is Roger Waters, and now he's being denounced as a Holocaust denier, essentially, by the State Department. I mean, this is absurd and scary. Now, Dave notes at the bottom of his article, and I was going to say this, I do work for antiwar.com, and Roger Waters has donated to us previously. Earlier this year, he wrote a really nice letter endorsing our group. And so, I really respect Roger Waters. I was a big Pink Floyd fan even before I worked at antiwar.com. And then, of course, working at antiwar.com, and Roger Waters comes out and endorses the site is a really cool thing to happen. But of course, looking at what this kind of activism has cost him, he's now being condemned by the U.S. State Department, which is one of the most important institutions on the face of the earth. All right, let's get into the big news today. I wrote this article for antiwar.com yesterday. Critical dam in southern Ukraine that provides water to Crimea destroyed. So this is the Nova Kakhovka Dam, and it's located in southern Ukraine along the Dnieper River, and it was destroyed on Tuesday. While Kiev and Moscow are accusing each other of carrying out the attack, Russia will suffer more consequences of the dam's destruction. The dam was built by the USSR in the 1950s and for over a year has sat on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. Now, when Russia took territory, they took a lot more territory in southern Ukraine. They lost a little bit of that in the offensive last year by Ukraine. But generally speaking, this dam has been enough of a frontline target that the Ukrainians have been looking at attacking it for quite some time. So, it really has sat on the front lines. It is nearly 100 feet tall, or was at least, and 10,000 feet wide. I think almost 11,000 feet actually. The dam was constructed as a hydroelectric power plant that created the Kakhovka Reservoir, which is over 2,000 square kilometers of surface area. And then, it's a very significant and large body of water that was created by this dam. And then Europe's largest nuclear power plant, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the ZMPP, and the Crimean Peninsula receive water from that reservoir. An explosion reportedly ripped through the dam on Tuesday morning, causing flooding to begin downstream. It is unclear if the attack was intentional. The BBC noted that the dam had been damaged within the last week. And so we'll get into this a little bit further down as to why there may have been an attack on the dam that wasn't meant to destroy the dam, that could have maybe led to this falling apart. So while a lot of people are saying that the dam was destroyed by an explosion on Tuesday, and that may also be the case, and I just want to be careful here that what actually happened wasn't that the dam there wasn't damaged earlier in the week. I think the BBC the end of May saying that no, it definitely didn't have an issue, and then from June 5th showing that it did. So it's unclear to me actually suffered damage and what was the issue, and if that was enough systemic damage to cause the dam to eventually have a catastrophic failure, or if maybe it had a little bit of damage and then was hit by another rocket and that's what caused the collapse. Of course, Ukraine is saying that Russia just blew it up from the inside out. So back to my article here. The most immediate impact of the dam's destruction is the flooding of the surrounding areas, which is expected to displace at least 16,000 people. A Ukrainian official said 8 towns, and this was as of me writing the article that was only a few hours after the dam breaking. He has said 8 towns had already been partially or completely flooded. I've read that it was about 40 or more that experienced severe flooding in mostly areas controlled by Russia. The region will also suffer environmental damage from the flooding. Ukraine has said that tons of industrial lubricant used in the hydroelectric power plant have leaked. So another concern is the ZMPP, which is controlled by Russian forces. The Kakhovka Reservoir provides cooling water to the massive power plant. Initially, the IAEA's response was to say they're closely monitoring the situation, but there's no immediate nuclear safety risk. Now, I'm not sure what their assessment is going to be, what's going to happen a few weeks or months from now. I'm sure they're able to keep some water in their cooling ponds and different like areas that they've built around the ZMPP. But if this does feed like the water reservoirs around the ZMPP, then this could create an issue, in the long term, because the plant's not able to get enough water. So Kiev immediately blamed Moscow for the attack, calling it a terrorist attack and a war crime. The Ukraine Defense Ministry suggested Russia destroyed the dam as a tactical defense of the region. Now, I don't think this makes a whole lot of sense, because Russia was using the dam, or could use the dam to move troops onto the other side. There was a bridge over it, so that was something significant. Additionally, most of the flooding impacted Russian areas, and then this hurt core Russian concerns. So Ukrainian President Zelensky claimed it was impossible for Ukrainians to have carried out the dam's destruction. Russia has been controlling the dam and the entire Kakhovka HPP, or the hydroelectric power plant, for more than a year. It is physically impossible to blow it up somehow from the outside by shelling. It was mined by the Russian occupiers and they blew it up. Now, there is a long history of dams being destroyed in fighting, particularly in World War II and in the Korean War, and I believe in the Vietnam War. The U.S. used aerial dropped munitions to destroy a lot of dams. So what he's saying is just stupid. However, it's worse because it's an outright lie. So, however, last year, Ukrainian Major General told the Washington Post that he considered attacking the dam during Ukraine's counteroffensive last year. He said he considered flooding the river. The Post reported the Ukrainian, he said, even considered a test strike, or even conducted. So they actually did conduct a test strike with a HIMARS launcher on one of the floodgates of the Nova Kakhovka Dam, making 3 holes in the metal to see if the Dnieper's water could be raised enough to stymie Russia's crossing, but not flooding the nearby villages. The test was a success. And so he's saying that this major general in Ukraine's army is saying that they actually fired a rocket at the dam last year to see if they could carry out an attack on the dam that would cause partial damage to prevent Russia from using it to move their troops and cause some minor flooding, but at the same time not cause major flooding. Now, I'm not an engineer. I would assume, if I did talk to an engineer who developed dams, that you probably can't fire missiles into the side of a dam and expect to do so tactically, particularly one that's 80 years old and was built by the USSR, so tactically that you're not going to crack or cause any other systemic damage that could lead to a catastrophic failure. I mean that just seems really stupid to me. If any of my listeners are an engineer, I would love to hear more of a professional take on that, but that seems really stupid and really dangerous. And so if we're looking at what the BBC said, is it possible that the satellite imagery confirms that there maybe was an attack with HIMARS or some other munition from the Ukrainian side on the dam intended to damage the roadway on top of the dam, intended to cause some minor flooding to prevent Russia from using it, and then that caused more severe damage that over the course of 3, 4, 5 days caused a catastrophic failure with the dam? Or is it possible that maybe they hit it didn't cause enough damage, and so they tried to hit it again, and that's what caused the catastrophic failure yesterday? I think there's a lot of questions, but I think that's the right track, that it maybe wasn't the intent of Ukraine to destroy the whole dam, but they were obviously possibly willing to take the risk. All right, so now we get into the statement from the Russians here. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Ukrainian forces were behind the destruction of the dam. The president receives reports through the defense ministry and other services on what is happening around the Kakhovka HPP. Here we can already say unequivocally that this was a deliberate sabotage by the Ukrainian side. The attack on the dam will have an impact on a core Russian concern in Ukraine. Through a 250-mile-long northern Crimean canal, the Kakhovka Reservoir feeds water to the peninsula that Moscow annexed in 2014. Before the invasion of Ukraine, the Kremlin regularly issued demands to Kiev that irrigation systems supplying water to Crimea remain open. Peskov said that part of Kiev's motivation for the attack was depriving Crimea of water. The level in the reservoir is dropping, hence the water supply to the northern canal is drastically reduced. Peskov said, adding, apparently this sabotage was also due to the fact that having launched large-scale operations 2 days ago, the Ukrainian armed forces have been unable to achieve their aims. Their operations are stalled. And it's interesting here, if Ukraine is conducting their counteroffensive, then the last counteroffensive they considered attacking the dam, but decided they didn't need to. If this time, because things weren't going so well, they decided they needed to carry out that attack. All right, we have a lot more news on Ukraine to get to today. U.S. not concerned about Ukrainian attacks and Russia escalating the war. This one is one of those articles that I just hate talking about, because it really does terrify me if the White House really isn't concerned about Ukrainian attacks inside Russia, as the New York Times is reporting. So the New York Times reported on Tuesday that the Biden administration has shrugged off Ukrainian attacks inside Russia, as U.S. officials are no longer concerned about the escalation as they were earlier in the war. The report said that during the first year of the war, the Biden administration worried that if Ukraine hit targets inside Russia, Moscow could retaliate against NATO. But those fears are gone, as the administration does not seem concerned over the most recent attacks inside Russia, which have included drone strikes on residential areas of Moscow and cross-border raids in the Russia's Belgorod region that were carried out using U.S. armored vehicles. It's not like we're going to go out and investigate this, White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby told reporters when asked if the U.S. thought Ukraine was behind attacks in Moscow. According to the Times, administration officials seem even less concerned behind closed doors. The lessening of concern of escalation from the U.S. and NATO allies has been a pattern throughout the war. In March 22, the U.S. and other NATO countries rejected a Polish offer to send Soviet-made MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine over concerns that Russia could view the move as the alliance directly entering the war. Earlier this year, Poland and Slovakia delivered MiG-29s to Ukraine, and President Biden recently signed off on Ukrainian countries sending U.S.-made F-16s to Kiev. The U.S. has also used more it also used to be more concerned about the possibility of Russian President Vladimir Putin using a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine. But this has waned as well. U.S. officials think Putin might use a nuke if he feels cornered or feels control of Crimea is threatened. Despite that assessment, the Biden administration officials have repeatedly said that they support Ukrainian attacks on Crimea and won't restrict Kiev's ability to use American-made weapons on the peninsula. And so you really have to start to worry. I'm really starting to worry that this is getting to the point where the U.S. just doesn't seem to have any attachment to reality about what's happening in Ukraine, and they're willing to push Russia really, really far. And at some point, far is going to be too far, and what's going to happen is very concerning. So this is a really important article, and really shocking and disturbing. Now, let's see. Moving on here, U.S. officials confirm NATO weapons were used in an attack on Russia's Belgorod Oblast. U.S. officials confirmed to the Washington Post that the U.S. and other NATO equipment was used in a cross-border attack on Russia's Belgorod region that was launched on May 22nd. The fighters used at least 4 U.S.-made mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles known as MRAPs. The Post reported that 3 of those MRAPs were provided to Ukraine by the U.S. and 1 was provided by Poland. The fighters were also armed with rifles made by Belgium and the Czech Republic, and at least 1 Swedish-made AT-4 anti-tank weapon. AT-4s are used by the U.S. military, and the U.S. has shipped them to Ukraine. The attack was claimed by 2 groups of Russian volunteers who have been fighting for Kiev, the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Legion of Free Russia. The Russia Volunteer Corps includes members who are open neo-Nazis and white nationalists, including its leader. And so, look at that. The U.S. is arming neo-Nazi militias in Ukraine to carry out attacks in Russia. And then Belgium seems a little bit more concerned about all this than the U.S., with the prime minister asking Ukraine if Belgian rifles were used by pro-Ukrainian forces in that attack. I'm not sure it's going to make a huge difference if Belgium is upset about it or not, and they'll probably be whipped into line by the rest of the alliance. But it is an interesting development. We could keep our eye on that. Let's move on and talk a little bit more about the counteroffensive here. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, said the Ukrainians are well prepared to launch a counteroffensive against Russian forces, and that is thanks to the support of the U.S. and NATO and the weapons that they have provided. So I think it's too early to tell what the outcome is going to be. I think that the Ukrainians are very well prepared, as you know very well. The United States and other allied countries in Europe and really around the world have provided training and ammunition and device intelligence, etc., to the Ukrainians, Milley told CNN. He added, "We are supporting them. They are in war that's an existential threat to the very survival of Ukraine, and it has a greater meaning than to the rest of the world, for Europe, really for the United States, but also for the globe." And so it does look like that offensive is underway. Let's move on here and talk about Zelensky's threat not to attend the NATO summit. So there is a upcoming NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, that's going to happen middle of July. We've been talking about it a lot on the show. I think there's going to be a lot of news coming out of that summit as far as weapon transfers to Ukraine and potentially some kind of promise to Ukraine that gives them a concrete path to membership or significantly upgrading Ukraine's status within the alliance. And so Zelensky is saying that he will not go to the summit unless Kiev is given a signal that it's going to receive full membership in the alliance. And so I wrote an article for the Libertarian Institute. Group of Eastern NATO members demand alliance give multi-year defense commitment to Ukraine, which I think kind of explains the dynamics here within NATO. So a 9-nation bloc within NATO is preparing to push the alliance to adopt a multi-year plan for arming Ukraine. The leaders of Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and the Slovak Republic, a subgroup within NATO dubbed the Bucharest Nine, met in Slovakia on Tuesday. The gathering was in preparation for the upcoming summit of NATO leaders in Lithuania. The Eastern European leaders plan to lobby other member states to pledge a longer-term commitment to keep Kiev flush with foreign weapons. We aim for a more robust multi-year and comprehensive support package for Ukraine, which will reinforce its dynamic capabilities, also by implementing NATO standards and increasing interoperability with NATO. A joint statement said, "We see merit in several allies' proposal to establish a joint analyst training and education center with Ukraine based in Poland. The Bucharest Nine will also push the military alliance to outline a clear path to NATO membership for Ukraine, a proposal first floated by Western officials in 2008. We expect that in Vilnius we will upgrade our political relations with Ukraine to a new level and launch a new political track that will lead to Ukraine's membership in NATO once conditions allow. We will continue to support our support to Ukraine on this path." The debate over Ukraine's place in NATO has stirred some frustrations within the bloc. Last month, the Washington Post reported the alliance is divided by East and West, with Eastern European members, along with Kiev, seeking a concrete path to membership and a clear timeline for when Ukraine might be permitted to join. However, some Western European states and Washington do not agree and prefer to focus on the war with Russia. In an interview published in the Wall Street Journal on Saturday, Ukrainian President Zelensky threatened to sit out the summit if he does not see any forward movement on membership. "If we are not given a signal in Vilnius, I believe there is no point for Ukraine to be at this summit," he said. It is unclear if the U.S. and its partners in Western Europe will relent to the Bucharest Nine demands. However, last month, French President Emmanuel Macron called on NATO to offer a concrete and tangible security guarantees to Ukraine. However, he noted membership was unlikely. There does appear to be some consensus in the alliance for the multi-year plan to modernize Ukraine's military with Western weapons and training, with Macron also calling to build something between the security provided to Israel and full-fledged membership. Polish President Duda told the Wall Street Journal last month that Western leaders were supportive of developing ties with Kiev, similar to the relationship that Washington keeps with Tel Aviv. Israel receives at least $3.3 billion in military aid from the United States every year and has been granted the status of a major non-NATO ally, providing Tel Aviv with advanced access to American weapons. Secretary of State Antony Blinken offered a similar proposal during a speech in Finland on Friday. He said, "America and our allies are helping meet Ukraine's needs on the current battlefield while developing a force that can deter and defend against aggression for years to come. That means helping build a Ukrainian military for the future with long-term funding, a strong air-to-force centered on modern combat aircraft, an integrated air and missile defense network, advanced tanks and armored vehicles, national capacity to produce ammunition and training and support to keep the forces and equipment combat ready." The Bucharest Nine additionally took aim at China and urged the NATO bloc to continue to increase its presence in the Indo-Pacific. Any provision of lethal aid by China to the Russian aggressor would be unacceptable and would only prolong the conflict and deepen global instability. The group added, at the NATO summit in Vilnius, we expect to further step up our cooperation, also with like-minded countries, and particularly with the Indo-Pacific partners and with the European Union. Paris has recently indicated it has no interest in ratcheting up tensions between NATO and Beijing. The Financial Times reported on Monday that Macron objects to NATO's plan to open a liaison office in Japan, arguing that the alliance should confine itself to the North Atlantic. So I think that about covers kind of, what's going on with the debate within NATO. They're 100% on board with arming Ukraine, and they are less on board with adding Ukraine as a NATO member. Now, I think this makes it very clear as to what the plan among the Western European countries, Washington, Canada, is here. And that is to provide Ukraine with enough weapons and training to keep them fighting against the Russians. But ultimately, it doesn't seem like there's any interest in helping the Ukrainians to win the war or to bring the war to a negotiated settlement. And so really the objective is just about, from their perspective, killing and weakening Russia. And, I think that also explains why in March of 22, they were hesitant to give Ukraine mid-29s, but here a year later, they're willing to send them F-16s. All right, let's move on here. This is, I think, maybe the last article I have today. It's very important. Oh, there's one more thing I want to mention, but this is, we're getting close to the end of the show here. Lavrov says Russia must keep in mind that F-16s can carry nuclear weapons. This from Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com. Very important here. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov said Monday that Moscow must keep in mind that American-made F-16 fighter jets are capable of carrying nuclear weapons. The Russian diplomat made the comments when warning how the U.S. and NATO are escalating their role in the conflict in Ukraine. President Biden recently signed off on European countries delivering U.S.-made F-16s to Ukraine, although it's not clear how many Kiev will receive or when they will be delivered. Anything that can be expected from the leaders of the U.S. and other Western countries, they are already proving this when following advanced long-range weapons and tanks. They are now seriously preparing for F-16s, Lavrov said during a visit to a Russian military base in Tajikistan. We must keep this in mind. One of the modifications for the F-16 has the capability to deliver nuclear weapons. F-16s are capable of carrying B-61 nuclear gravity bombs, which the U.S. stores in several European countries. Under NATO's nuclear sharing program, there are U.S. B-61 nuclear bombs deployed in Italy, Germany, Turkey, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And so this is important to understanding how Russia is going to react to the transfer of F-16s. And again, just really concerned here about the long-term survival of the human race when you look at the fact that Washington is willing to poke and push Moscow so far on so many issues here. All right, last up here, Washington Post says U.S. knew Ukraine planned to attack the Nord Stream pipelines. And so this is a little bit more interesting than it sounds, because initially I was like, this is a psyops. They're just trying to diminish Seymour Hersh's reporting. However, this reporting does mention the Baltops 22 war games. And in Hersh's reporting on this, he says that the U.S. used the cover of those war games to plant the explosives. Now, this report says that, I guess, shortly after the war games, the Ukrainians were planning to plant these explosives, or were looking at carrying out this attack then. And so it's kind of interesting. Now, apparently this information came from a document that was in the Discord lead. So those are the documents that Airman Jat Cheshera put on Discord and eventually leaked out. Now, the problem with this one is the Washington Post did not publish it online. And so while there's a lot of documents that the public does have access to from Jat Cheshera's cache of documents, that we don't have access to all of them, and some of them are kept within, these major news corporations. And so, they're saying, oh yeah, this is something that was in those leads, but we're not going to show it to you, which is very suspicious to me. And I think maybe that there's more here, that the Washington Post is reporting all of it, and maybe there is some information in that document. But I still don't buy the idea that Ukraine destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines. All right, everybody. That's where I will wrap up the show for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'll be back with more shows later in the week.